Melissa, as an innovation strategist who's passionate about sparking creativity and innovation, why do our most deeply ingrained habits and thought patterns often work against creativity? And what's the first step to loosening that grip?
That is such a rich question. So here's the thing. When habits are deeply ingrained, it means that we're doing the same thing over and over. But creativity requires us to get outside of our comfort zone. Creativity means that we're doing something that we haven't done before, something new, something different. And so it requires us to lean into uncertainty, get outside of that space of the known. So when we're inside of our deeply ingrained habits and our patterns, while routine can actually be helpful in a lot of ways because it sort of tamps down the fear, when all we do is the same thing over and over again, when we never step outside of that comfort zone, then we're never going to tap into our creativity. So what can be really, really useful is to have established routines, established patterns throughout our days so that it enables us the freedom to lean into uncertainties, to step into that fear zone in the times when we say, okay, this is the time when I'm going to be creative, when I'm going to allow myself to lean into uncertainty, to try some, to take risks, because I know I can do that because I've given myself lots of structure, lots of routine, lots of habit throughout the rest of my day. So my brain isn't constantly on overload from anxiety all day long. It can sort of relax into the routine throughout the day so that it has more ability for us to take those risks during the time when we're asking our brains, our minds to be creative. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think based on what you just said, what I could take from that is that our brains like predictability,
Yeah.
like to just know that we are safe, that we are in a familiar area, that anything that we do, we know the outcome.
Yeah.
Therefore, we get into these patterns, these habits of doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, and that puts us in a very parasympathetic nervous system. We're just kind of very relaxed, very calm. And but that also, according to what you're saying, affects our creativity because we don't want to think outside of ourselves. We don't want to think outside the box. We don't want to even give the chance of exploring something new, because even though that exploring something new might bring great things to us, since we don't know, that's scary. Sounds like.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I experience this all the time in my artistic practice where I the process is this. Trying something new is scary. Once you start trying something new, yeah, all the gremlins go off inside my head. I'll speak in in my own pronouns here. Inside my own head, the gremlins start going, "Oh my god, that sucks. That's awful. Don't even try. Who do you think you are?" All those little scripts start firing. If I'm able to keep persisting past that, eventually I might get into a nice little groove and I'll find a sort of a flow in whatever process I'm doing over a period of days or weeks, perhaps. And I'll find maybe it's some style of art that visual art that I'm doing. Maybe it's a style of music that I'm doing, whatever it is. And something starts to work, something starts to click, and it feels really good. And I'm exploring within that, and I'm trying new things, and I start to get into this groove. Feels great. I'm making things that I actually like. My gremlins are sort of quieting down. If I do that long enough, that groove starts to get deeper and it turns into a rut. So at a certain point, I get so comfortable that I start to get a little bit bored, and I'm not sort of I've gotten comfortable enough inside this groove that I'm not pushing outside of it anymore. I'm not finding new things inside that groove. It doesn't feel creative anymore. It's not delighting me anymore because it's not sparking that, "Ooh, that was neat. That's new. I haven't done that thing before." I'm just repeating the same old thing. I'm rehashing the same old thing over and over and over again. It's gotten old and stale. So now I'm in a rut. But here's the thing, I've gotten very comfortable in this rut. And so it takes me a while. And now the rut's very deep, and it takes me a while to climb. I'm gonna use this metaphor for all it's worth. It takes me a while to climb up the sides of that rut because now I have to start the process over again. And it's really scary to step outside of that known place and lean into uncertainty again. It feels like reaching my hand into a black hole. I don't know what's there. And it feels like might get sucked in and never never find my way out. Whatever I might possibly create, am I ever going to make something good again? What's going to happen? Is there any, maybe I really suck. Maybe I'm a terrible artist. Maybe that was a fluke. Maybe everything I've made in the past has always been a fluke. All those gremlins are firing again. That's the process. So I have to start all over again. So it often takes me a long time to get out of that rut and to start over with, a completely new line of direction of work. And that is the process. Starts all over.
You know what's interesting there at the beginning, you said about all, that voices in our head, the self-doubt, the equi- the parts of ourselves that are tough on us, that we just feel that we might not be good enough, that we might not deserve, that we are not as talented, and all the chatter in our head that most people, I would assume, experience. But also, depending on, there are just quite a few moments by chance, I think, that we experience that intuition when it comes to creativity. It's like, oh, maybe I like, it's almost like your body telling you, guiding you in a sense, like you should explore this. And then you find yourself in that internal battle between
Mm,
your fears of, hey, you're not enough, you're not talented, you're not good, what you're doing. I mean, it makes no sense for you to do that. Stay safe. In fact, what you're trying to do, I'm telling you right away, it's not going to work. Might as well focus on something else. But then there's this other part of you like, I think that if we go there, we'll be okay. And fighting the negative voice with the positive one is hard. I think the only way, as you said, you have to start taking action and start just doing things to sort of tell your body that it's okay, that you're going to be safe. And then you just, instead of jumping from your comfort zone all the way to your danger zone, because
mm.
obviously that's a no-go, what if you start taking baby steps into your stretch zone and you're expanding that comfort zone more, more, more? Which is, I like that you said that, because then even if you stretch, at some point you're gonna, if you don't keep moving outside of the comfort zone, then that new stretch comfort zone becomes your new comfort zone. Now
Yeah.
you're willing to do more things that you used before. But again, I think it's a lifelong journey of keep expanding and keep exploring. But one thing that I really like about it at the beginning that you said that I could relate to, the patterns that we get trapped in, like perfectionism, right? And
Mm.
overthinking, which I think in many cases just kills creativity, because the more we try to be perfect, the more that we're trying to put our works, like we're going to try to think all the different ways that our project will be the greatest, because at the end of the day, I think that we attach our self-worth to the outcome we get, our ability to do things. If we're not very good at something, that means that I'm not as valuable, and that's when we try to be perfect, overthink, and that kills creativity. What's your approach on helping people break free from these blocks?
Oh my God. So, well, first of all, you should know that perfectionist paralysis has been a huge bugaboo bugaboo in my own life. I was a diehard perfectionist for like my whole young childhood, teenage years, young adulthood. And I spent years and years and years really working to sort of peel away those layers. And it's still something that I wouldn't say that I'm like cured of that. I think of it as kind of like an addiction. You know, it's something that we are continually having to kind of dance with, maybe is a good way to put it. So now I call myself very mindfully, I call myself an intentional imperfectionist. And I really embrace the idea of intentional imperfection. And what I mean by that is not to be like I really care about the quality of my work. So it's not that I'm like, oh, I'm going to be sloppy. I'm going to, not care about my work. It's not about that. It's really about self-compassion, because perfectionism and self-compassion are polar opposites. And perfectionists, there's so much about inside of perfectionism. You just do not allow yourself to forgive yourself for anything that is uh, you don't forgive yourself for not being human, or for being human. Like, you're not allowed to be human when you're a perfectionist. And by being an intentional imperfectionist, it is the same thing as self-compassion. And so I highly recommend a book called Self-Compassion by the world's foremost expert in self-compassion, named Dr. Kristen Neff. And it really has changed my life. And it's really like peeling away layers of how to relate to yourself. And it's something, it's like we get to have self-compassion with ourselves, even around our ability to have self-compassion for ourselves. So when I find myself beating myself up sometimes. And so I get to have self-compassion about the fact that I'm imperfect around my ability to have self-compassion. Like, oh my gosh, you just bait yourself up around that. It's okay. You're human. Everybody does that sometimes. That's a piece of common humanity that I have with other people, which is an element of self-compassion, recognizing the common humanity, having the mindfulness, the awareness to step outside of the distress and label what's happening. And then the self-kindness to be able to say, it's okay. It's okay, sweetie. And even give yourself a little caress, a little hug, and be gentle with yourself. So I have what I refer to as my golden formula, which is expressed as a mathematical formula: self-awareness, which is, the ability to notice what's going on with yourself, plus self-compassion, which is those three components: the mindfulness piece, the common humanity piece, and the self-kindness piece. Self-awareness plus self-compassion equals the key to everything good.
You know, I I've been trying to apply more self compassion in my life. I used to be very very tough on myself, and I think there's which I get it. There's this story or lie. I think that most of us tell ourselves that if we are not tough on ourselves, we're never gonna make it. And if you think about it, right? Both extremes are definitely not helpful. If you are too tough on yourself, it will shatter your confidence every time that you're trying to do something and then you're not pleased with the results. Even if that result was decent enough, or even good enough, or even greater than you could have done in the past. But then if you're seeking a perfectionism just to not feel um bad about yourself, obviously is bad. But also, if you cuddle yourself too much, right, any type of work you do, you know that you're not doing your best work at that point, but then it's okay, I'm trying to be more compassionate with myself. You get to a point where you're never gonna, too much cuddling will keep you in your comfort zone, will it won't allow you to step out of your comfort zone. So finding that balance, what I found myself is like, is hard, because it's almost like, okay, I need to be kind to myself, I need to have self compassion, but at the same time I need to push myself as well, just to find that right balance, to just to grow in a way, or to improve in a way that also doesn't shatter or affects my confidence. So having said that, I think that one thing that applied to my life is telling myself, because I'm very much into the power of reframing, telling myself, hey, I'm experimenting, because for me, for many years has been, everything has been like a, like a all or nothing, like do or die. I would raise the stakes, and every time I would put something out, whether it was me approaching somebody, me creating a piece of content, anything, that would, my entire life or my entire well-being was putting in that. And technically speak, and we can never control the outcome. And I think that's where, now thinking about it, I think that's where overthink comes. We overthink trying to control the outcome, and we will just trying to, I will ruminate and ruminate, and because we want we want to predict the outcome, but then we cannot because it's outside our control. What have you found that at least have worked for you when it comes to controlling the overthinking?
Mm. Well, first, I want to address the concern about, how am I going to accomplish anything if I'm too, if I cuddle myself too much. And and I, as somebody who always had just a ton of ambition, that's been an issue for me. I've really struggled with that. How do I balance this? Is my ambition going to go away? I've definitely struggled with that as well. But I want to share that there have been some really fascinating scientific research around self-compassion, and a couple of studies that I'm thinking of. One was really interesting, where they had um, research subjects who were going to a gym, or they had a goal for going to the gym, and the control group was not given any kind of intervention at all. And then the other group was given a small compassion intervention, self compassion intervention. And I don't remember the specifics of with the self compassion intervention, but it was something like, if you skip a day, if you miss a day going to the gym, just don't be too hard on yourself. And remember that, you know, other people miss a day too. And, be kind to yourself. It was something like that. I don't remember the specifics. And what they discovered is that people who had a self compassion intervention actually achieved their goals with much more likelihood than those who didn't. So the people who beat themselves up ended up not meeting their goals, but the people who had the self-compassion intervention did meet their goals. There was another study that did around the same kind of thing around dieting. And in every case, people who had a self-compassion intervention ended up achieving their goals dramatically more often than those who didn't. And if you think about it, this makes a lot of sense, because if you know that if you mess up, you are going to beat yourself up, then and you know that you're at some point, you're going to stumble, then in your brain is going to go, why even bother trying? Because you're going to get beaten up. So it's better to just not even try and to just give up. And certainly at the first moment that you stumble, it's easier to just not get back on the horse. I'm mixing metaphors there. But so self-compassion is the greatest tool in your toolkit if you are an ambitious person who wants to accomplish goals. Because here's the thing, everybody is going to stumble in the pursuit of their goals. The problem is not the stumbling. The problem is we want to get back on the wagon. We want to get, or back on the horse, or whatever your metaphor you want to use. And if you don't have self-compassion, then it's going to be really hard for you to get back on track.
You know what's funny? Well, probably not funny, but ironic. Is that when we look at other people, when we deal with other people, when we talk to other people, whether it's our friends, our partners, our kids, whoever, we understand and we know that positive reinforcement works better than negative reinforcement, right? We just know how somebody will respond better if you have a ratio of 5 to 1, 5 positive things against 1 negative thing, the person's going to be more inclined to do something. And and this is, I'm going to go on a tangent trying to make the point. I was watching a clip from from a podcast interview on YouTube months and months ago. They were interviewing this lawyer, and he said that he had a girlfriend once. Well, first of all, this person shaves 5 times a week, and then on weekends he tries, to shave because he's kind of like, it annoys him. This girlfriend he had would complain all the time, like, "Can you please shave? I mean, it's pokey, it's uncomfortable. I don't like it." And he would start resenting her. Where it's like, "Bro, I'm a clean shave like 5 days a week. Can you give me 2 days?" But then later on, he had another girlfriend who she kind of did a similar thing, but in an opposite way. She starts saying, "I love how your face feels when it's like clean shave." So by doing positive reform, it's like, "I love this about you." Then he would even shave on weekends just because how you change the word from "I hate how it feels" to "I love how it feels." And you know that almost every human, if you understand human behavior, if you want someone to do something or to have the kind of behavior you're hoping them to have, if you use positive reinforcement, it's going to work. But then we feel that no, we are different. We need the negative reinforcement. We need to hear those negative voices. And then we hit that wall and it's not working. It's like, no, 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 no. I need to be even tougher. We get trapped in this cycle of, well, I understand that those, yeah, but those people are kind of weak. And no, I'm built different. And everyone thinks that they're built different and then they're not. I mean, we're all humans. We're all the same thing. So yeah, that's the irony that I find myself many times.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. It also makes me think about, humans have this negativity bias. So we will latch on to the one negative comment, even if we get, 100 positive reviews or responses or 100 pieces of positive feedback. And then we get one negative piece of feedback. And that's the only thing we can remember. And that's hardwired into us just as a species. And that reminds me of that. And then also just the negative reinforcement versus the positive reinforcement, I think plugs into so many of us have this sort of, I don't know if it's, I don't actually know the psychology behind it, but the sort of, it just makes me think of when I was a little kid and my mom would come by and say, "You need to clean your room today." And it would inevitably be on a day when I had decided my room, the messiness of my room is just, I just can't stand it anymore. I'm going to clean my room. And then my mom would come by and tell me that I had to clean my room. And I would be like, dang it, now I'm not going to clean my room just because my mom told me that I have to clean my room. And this sort of innate, I mean, I don't know if it's innate or I don't know if it's a personality trait for some humans or if all of us are this way. But if somebody tells us we have to do something or they don't like something about us, then it tends to trigger this resistance that we don't want to do something if somebody says we have to. And that maybe that's cultural, maybe that's personality. I don't know, but it's quite common. That's for sure.
I mean, I can't speak for everyone. I don't have the numbers. I don't have the studies, but I would assume that that would be ingrained into our DNA. Some sort of, from an evolutionary standpoint, just being, when somebody tells you or forces you to do something, it's like, no, I don't want to do it. Yeah, it's just like because I haven't met the single person who's just like, yes, sir, let me just do it. I guess people in the army, but they're trained to be like that. Who knows? But yeah, it's very interesting. Obviously, that with the negative bias, we tend to focus more on the negative, and then we need to have an intentional effort to just flip the script and to focus more on the positive. But speaking of that, there's something about the positive thinking or the negative thinking or the stories that we might have or we might have told ourselves. And one key one is around play or around even playfulness. So if somebody like, let's say, or in this case, me, right? Because it happens a lot, me, has spent years viewing play as a frivolous or unproductive. And this has been my life. I don't allow myself to quote unquote have fun or to do things that will be enjoyable if I have things to do. How can they begin to rewrite their their brains to embrace it as a force for creativity and success? Because one thing I've realized is if you don't play, you cannot be creative because you find yourself in that creative block.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I love this question so much. And you might be surprised to learn, given that I am a play practitioner and I use play in the work that I do with teams and organizations, and I come from this creative background. I don't come from the world of, corporations. I worked for 15 years as an artist. Before that, I trained at Juilliard as a dancer, and I've been a jazz singer songwriter. I've been a performing improviser. So, people often think that, oh, Melissa, she, must have always been like just brimming with creative confidence and, incorporating creativity and play all the time. And in fact, it's something that I have struggled with and continue to struggle with. And that's part of the reason why I'm so passionate about it. I spent about 15 years of my youth believing that I was a non-creative person. And when I was a child, I remember thinking, life is serious business. So I was not one of these, uh, kids in the classroom who's like the clown kid or whatever. And, and while I was a working professional artist, I was so bought into this story in my head that I put so much pressure on my art to make my living that, and I bought into this story in my head that everything I made had to bring in money and had to be amazing. And I didn't allow myself time to make art for the joy of it. So that's actually how I ended up becoming a musician, because I started making music as my fun thing that I did on the side. And I got very burned out. And when I finally came back to, realize I need to get back to making art for myself, I realized that the doorway in was through play. But because I'd spent so long making art for clients and to their specifications, I had forgotten how. When I started making art after this 15 years of believing that I was a non-creative person, it was pure play. It was exploration. It was following my curiosity. It was really, like a kid playing in Sandbox, which is why my book is called The Creative Sandbox Way. And I have this metaphor, this like central metaphor of my life really is this creative sandbox, which is really the mind space of being a 4-year-old kid, where you're in a sandbox, you're just mucking around. It's not about making money. It's not about winning awards. It's not about impressing anybody. It's purely about what would happen if I did this? What would happen if I did that? And it's you in the sand, and that's it. And maybe some toys, maybe some water. And that is the creative sandbox. So I had to like relearn how to play. It's not really relearn, but like unlock what was getting in my way, which is what I teach people now how to do also. And in order to do that at the time, what I figured out is if nothing else, I'm really good at following rules. I'm a rule follower. I'm not one of those rebel types. And for better or for worse. And so I developed a set of little rules for myself, which are probably still buried somewhere on my blog if you go back far enough, years ago. And there were probably about 4 of them at the time. They started with there is no wrong. And if you get to the place where the piece isn't finished, it needs something, but you don't want to ruin it, go ahead and ruin it. There was things like that. I don't remember what they all were, but over the next couple of years, I expanded them into 10. I call them guideposts now, because most creatives will really bristle at the idea of rules. They're just principles. I didn't make them up. I just curated them and I made them more pithy. And they now form the backbone of my book, The Creative Sandbox Way, these 10 guideposts. So, and these are still principles, these 10 guideposts that I look to every single day. And they help me ground myself as a creative person. And they have made a difference for thousands of people at this point. I don't even know how many people whose lives have been changed by these guideposts, by the Creative Sandbox Way. So one of them is number 5 is just start anywhere. So for example, if I want to write an article, a blog post, a newsletter, anything, the hardest thing for anyone who's starting anything, let's say it's a writer or an artist, is facing the blank page. There's this intense fear of the blank page because you don't know where to start. You don't want to mess it up. You don't want it to be crappy, right? You got to start. And also you have to let it be crappy. You just have to let it, because we need the crap to fertilize the good stuff. We need that crap. You got to think of it like, have you ever turned on a faucet or that's rusty, a rusty faucet? You turn it on and like the water that comes out is all brown and gunky and rusty. How do you get to the clear water? You let it flow. And so that's what you do. You just start and you let it flow out. And this is fantastic for writing. The first several paragraphs, maybe several pages, might be crap. That's fine. Nothing is ever wasted. There might be something inside of those first paragraphs or pages that end up being used somewhere else, or you might end up deleting all of it eventually, but you need to let it flow in order to get to the clear water, in order to get to the part that you're eventually going to publish. So that's how we get past that stuckness. You have to lower the bar, lower your expectations, let yourself make crap, and just start.
You said something very interesting, and then to me, it's like, okay, that's how I feel. Is when not feeling like a creative person, and I think that comes from we tend to associate creativity with traditional forms of art, whether you draw, you dance, you paint, play an instrument, or anything that is or even you act. But if you're not in one of those boxes, like I never found in myself, I was never good at playing instruments or drawing or painting or dancing or anything. To me, I never felt like a creative person, and I think because we see it that way, we have the wrong approach, and because our brains are designed to show us what we believe in. If we grow up with that story that creative person or creative people are those who perform or they are into those art forms, then that means I'm not creative. Therefore, I will never exploit that creative potential. How can somebody start changing the narrative and start even exploring and probably tapping into creative potential that they didn't know that they have when their story has been, well, I don't do any of these traditional art forms, therefore I cannot be creative?
Yeah, thank you for asking this question. This is such an important issue. And this a lot of the people that I work with in the corporate world are in exactly that position where maybe they're technical folks or whatever position they hold in corporate America, they don't necessarily pursue a traditionally identifiable, creative, artistic pursuit or whatever. And so they don't identify themselves as a creative or an artistic person or whatever, because we've done this huge disservice to, a huge number of people because we've created these categories of people who do these pursuits, these are the creatives, and everybody else, you don't get to identify as a creative. You know what? That's hogwash. Every single human, every single human on the planet is creative. It is who we are because creativity has to do with solving problems. It has to do with connecting dots. It has to do with just taking one thing and combining it with something else and turning it into something else. It has to do with how you think. There's so many different ways of being creative. I happen to be a creative who operates in all sorts of artistic different realms, but that's one way of being creative. And what I highly recommend is for people to allow themselves the opportunity to explore in realms where they may have been shut down when they are kids. That's one reason why often people consider themselves, well, I'm not creative because, I had a teacher who told me I couldn't draw, or I had a teacher who told me I couldn't sing, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is a very big reason why many people identify as not creative. They have not allowed themselves to try pursuits. I'm not saying that you have to do artistic things, but that is an excellent way to tap into your creative side. And it's not about becoming good. It's not about becoming a master of, painting or drawing or dance or calligraphy or music or whatever, but by trying something outside of your normal day-to-day routine, you gain a new appreciation for different ways of operating in the world. And I actually have a talk that I delivered that's recorded. I can share a link with you, all about how artistic pursuits are an incredible way to develop leadership skills. So maybe perhaps especially if you do not consider yourself a creative or an artistic type, simply by virtue of taking an improv class or taking a drawing class or taking a music class completely outside of your comfort zone, phenomenal way to develop leadership skills.
So, having said that, then in your mind, what's the most counterintuitive lesson about creativity and business that more leaders need to understand?
They absolutely go together. Business is all about creativity, really. Business is all about connection, communication, and creativity, the three C's. And the more your team and your teams, plural, are able to connect and communicate effectively and unlock their creativity, the more better your organization as a whole is going to be able to innovate and compete in the market.
Okay, so now that you mentioned about innovation, which is I can definitely, obviously you need to be creative to be able to innovate. That is like a that's kind of a given. I do feel that most companies, let's say many companies, I don't know if most of them, I would assume that the majority of them are like this. They place a great deal of emphasis on on innovation, but they often I think they expect like safe creativity, kind of like a low risk. It's almost like we all say that nobody, if you're at a company and your job is to hiring a in consulting firm to help you with some part of the business, nobody will get you will never get fired for hiring the top two consulting companies. But then if you go outside and then find a new company that is trying to do things differently and the end result doesn't pan out, you're probably going to get fired. So a lot of people feel like, well, I would rather just go with a safe bet that is going to keep my job rather than just trying something new, something outside of the box. Because if it doesn't work out, now if it doesn't work out, I'm probably going to get fired. I know that the top companies, the Apples and the Googles, are probably they they push this being extremely creative and they allow their employees to play a lot. But I think they're part of the minority of companies that actually allow that. How can leaders create a culture where true creative thinking is encouraged even when it challenges the status quo?
Uh, even when it challenges the status quo. Well, leaders are not necessarily big on challenging the status quo, but
Exactly.
yeah. But they. So here's the thing. I I talk to leaders all the time who are anxious about incorporating, say, play into their organizations, into their teams. Um, and I certainly appreciate and understand that concern, and I validate that concern. But play is, creativity is always rates very highly, or certainly for the past several times in all these like McKinsey reports and the various different reports that come out. So any leader who is savvy is going to be concerned about creativity in their organization. Play often is a harder sell because they have preconceived notions about what that means. But play is not a distraction from productivity, it is a catalyst for it. And think about this: when we're under pressure, our tendency is to double down and to work harder and to get more serious. But that approach activates our stress response, which literally shuts down the part of our brain that's responsible for creative thinking and innovation. And play does the opposite. It activates the brain networks that are associated with creativity while calming down the stress response. And it's actually the most practical approach to innovation in a fast paced environment. And I have seen this firsthand with tech teams on impossible deadlines. So, just a 10 to 15-minute period of time with intentional play can completely reset their thinking and lead to breakthroughs that might otherwise have taken days of grinding to achieve, if they achieve them at all. So if a leader was, skeptical about play, I'd tell them to think of it as not a nice to have luxury, but as a strategic tool for getting better results faster, because that's exactly what it is. And also play certainly can be like a recess type of situation, but the way that I work with organizations, I come in and play is actually the work. I'm using play as a mechanism in which to deliver the work, as opposed to, here, I'm going to come in and deliver a recess for everybody, and then you can get back to work. That's a great thing too, but that's not what I do. And I also can offer some very simple things that leaders can do, very small, simple ways that they can get started with. Like, just for example, you could start a meeting instead of starting with like, how is everybody today? Which might get a bunch of like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Very surface level responses, right? You can start with a quick, playful check-in, something unexpected, like, if your mood was a weather pattern, what would it be right now? And then, everybody takes a few seconds to share, I'm stormy with a chance of showers. which gets people to think a little bit differently. It's playful. It adds a spark of delight to your meeting. It invokes a little sense of mystery. It might get people to sort of follow up. Oh, tell me what that means. Stormy with a chance of showers. So it brings out how people are feeling, but it does it in a playful way.
I when you're giving that example, I realize how much I need to really rewire my brain. Because when you were saying that, first of all, I was thinking, okay, how can I incorporate play it into my work? And then we're definitely going to touch that point. But when you were giving that example, it's like, well, I feel like, cloudy with, chances of rain. In my brain, it's like, if I'm in a meeting and somebody asks me that, and I hear somebody else say, okay, that is silly. I'm here to be productive. I need to work, which brings to the point that I grind a lot and I don't allow myself to play it or to think outside. Anything that I do has to be, it's very carefully picked to to increase productivity. Many times when I try to give myself a break, and that's why I'm never home. If I'm home, it's just interviewing people. Because if I'm home and then I say, okay, I need to take a rest or a break, I don't know what to do with myself. I'm just like, I'm so much into the whole thing that if I'm not in front of a computer or reading or doing something, I feel like I'm either falling behind or something. Given that case of mine, right? How you operate. And I think that a lot of people, whether you are in a company, you are an entrepreneur, especially if you're an entrepreneur, you're in the early stages when you're just you doing everything. Can you give examples how to incorporate more playfulness or even more play into our work in a way that I don't want to feel or I don't want to think the way that I just thought when you were giving that example, because that right away told me, it's like, dude, I mean, you're messed up. You need to really just chill. So I I want to change that pattern of thought, basically.
Yeah, so a couple of things that anybody can do, whether
Mhm.
you're leading a team, whether you're an entrepreneur, whatever. So here's a great one. This is a particularly good one if you work in some kind of a team, which is have a wild idea day, like wild idea Wednesday or whatever day works for you. Set a timer, set aside 10 minutes, and have everybody in the room share their most outlandish solutions for whatever current challenge you want to work on. And the rule is that no idea is too crazy. Now, if you're going to do this, I highly recommend that you, as the leader, the facilitator of this wild idea, brainstorm, start and you put out an idea that is so completely like wild and crazy. It's over the top. It's 10 times, 100 times crazier than anyone else might possibly ever think of, because whatever you put out there is going to set the bar. And if you put something that's not very crazy, nobody else is going to go crazier than that. So you want to put something that is just not so totally, just absolutely insane. And then get out other people to share and see what happens. And then another thing that you can do, whether you're in a team or on your own, is to turn problems into games. So for example, I don't know, you're stuck on a product feature or something, and try the alien perspective game. How would an alien with 6 tentacles and no understanding of human culture use this product? And, bat that around and just turn it into a game. And then another thing that this is a foundational, basically a technique that's also a game from improv, which is to use the yes and technique. So anybody who's familiar with improv has probably heard yes and, which doesn't mean to accept. I mean, it doesn't mean to agree. It doesn't mean that you're in agreement with somebody. It means that you are accepting, validating their idea, and building on that idea. So you're, if you're on stage with somebody and they say, "Isn't it a lovely sunny day here in Colorado?" Then we're in Colorado and it's sunny. So you're going to say, yes, I'm putting on my sunscreen and I'm wearing a bikini and I've got my beach umbrella, or, you're adding to it. You're adding to the scene in some way. So when somebody shares an idea with you, it's very easy, especially if you're a gatekeeper in some way, which a lot of the clients that I deal with often are, instead of dismissing it and saying, no, that'll never work, blocking it in some way, invalidating it, which guess what? That person's never going to come to you with an idea again. Instead of doing that, practice building on it. Practice saying, oh, what a great idea, and we could also do XYZ. It does not mean that you're going to implement that idea. Just practice this yes and mindset. Try it with your kids. Try it with your spouse or your significant other and see what happens, not only internally, but see how they respond just in your own life. Just try that and see what happens as an experiment. And it always creates a more playful and generative conversation.
You know, it's it's kind of funny because I took some improv classes 2 years ago. Yeah, probably 2 years ago when I knew that I was going to launch a podcast. Okay, let me just take improv. Let me just get outside of my comfort zone, like loosen up quite a bit. And I'm very familiar with the yes hand, but I remember all my life I've been the person like, but no, I would just, but it would be to me as a sense of play. I would for whatever reason, I wouldn't agree with the other person. I would just go the opposite direction. But as I don't know if it bugged them or just challenge it. I don't know. To me, that was the play. I would play it in my head. It would come across as, okay, this guy, what is his problem, right? And it took me a minute to really, even in those classes, to accept and expand and build on that initial idea. Because I just want to go a different direction. And I feel it definitely it helped me create new neurological pathways. Okay, now let me try to think a little bit different, because for me it's all about blocking, 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 blocking. And as you said, if you start, even if you're messing around, the other person or even your own brain doesn't know that you're messing around. Therefore, it's gonna block every time, or it's gonna um, shut down, and it would never share with you anything again. As you said, if you're a leader and one of your employees comes to you and then you just say, no, I don't like that, the person most likely is not going to come back. Or even if you have a crazy idea for your own self, just to be creative, and you shut it down, then that intuition, that part of you, is not going to show up again, or it's going to be very hard for that part to show up again. So I can definitely see that. And I'm I'm in a work in progress at this point. I'm trying to
Aren't we
get better.
all?
Yeah, true. Fair, fair, fair. True. So, yeah, Emilis, I've been having a great conversation with you. But as a closing question, if you could leave people with one reframe about creativity that could change the way that they approach their life and work, what would it be?
Mm. So one reframe about creativity that I would leave people with is that everybody is creative, and that the things that you are doing already in your life that you don't think of as creative, I challenge you to look at them from a different perspective, because you might be thinking, oh, no, 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 that's not creative because I'm insert title or label here. And I challenge you to look at them, turn it around 180 degrees and look at it from a different perspective and see how very creative what you are already doing is. And I also challenge you to look at things that you might be feel a little tug to do, that there might be a little gremlin voice in your head saying, no, no, you don't get to do that because you're not creative. And notice that voice and say to that voice, thank you so much for your concern, but you're not the boss of me. And whatever that pull is that, like, gee, I wish I could do whatever it is, I don't know what it is for you. Drawing, music, dancing, improv, something that has a creative label to it. Maybe explore how you might give it a try. Just purely for the fun of it. You don't have to be good at it to enjoy it.
I love that reframing and that answer. And when you were saying that, I just thought about it, just kind of like a one phrase. It was, you know, written in my mind. It's like, okay, um, all artists are creative, but not all creative are artists, baby. And if we probably see it from that point of view, that I'm creative, but I can tell myself I'm creative, but I don't necessarily have to be an artist or artistic. I don't need to be in those, as we were mentioned before, artistic or art forms. And if we are able to change that story, and that's why I asked you for that reframe, and I love that answer, maybe we can start believing ourselves
Yeah.
that we are creative.
Yeah.
So
We all are. Yep.
yeah, love it. Yeah, Melissa, I mean, I had like, way more questions. I could go for another hour or two. Loving having you here. But where can people find you, work with you? I know that you have books, all of that.
Yeah, the easiest place to find me is at my website, melissadinwiddie.com. I'm also on LinkedIn all the time, where you can also find me at my name, Melissa Dinwiddie. And I do post periodically on Instagram. You can see my art there, and where I am at, not my name, at uh, a underscore creative underscore life. And I've also made a special link for listeners here with there's a QR code if you're watching the video, and the link is bit.ly slash RWP thank you, RWP for redefining wisdom podcast, thank you, all lowercase. So bit.ly slash RWP thank you. And if you go to that link and fill out a little form, you can get the first 50 pages of my book, The Creative Sandbox Way.
Thank you. And once again, Melissa, it was a complete pleasure having you on. I had a great, great conversation, honestly.
Thanks so much for having me, Daniel. This has been a total delight.